Alright, with this video here, I'm going to show you how to create and edit lists with your TI-84 calculator. Lists are very important for this class because they're how your calculator stores data. So anytime we have to do any sort of data analysis, we're going to have to work with lists. So it's important to understand them from the beginning. So first thing we're going to show is how to access the lists. There's two ways to input a list variable. You can use the number keys. So if you look at the numbers 1 through 6, above them you'll see some blue letters that say L1, L2, all the way up to L6. Those are your lists. So you can use the blue commands by hitting the second button. Notice the second button is blue. Now our cursor has the up arrow that lets us know we're in second mode, and we can pick whatever list we want. So let's say we wanted L5, we would hit the number 5. And then we could print its contents to screen if we wanted to, but because this is an empty list, when I hit enter, it just gives me an error that says invalid dim. So if you get this error at any point, that's what it means. It means your list is empty. Let's go ahead and exit out of that. The other way of accessing a list is through the list menu. So if you notice the stat button above it in blue letters, you'll see the word list. So to access a blue command, we hit second and then stat. And then it brings up the names submenu. And notice the names here, L1 all the way up to L6. That's the same thing that appears above the number keys. These are your lists. It's just a different way of accessing them. We can navigate through the menu here by hitting the arrow buttons and select whichever one we want. Say L3. You can also hit the 3 button directly. So it says 3: there. That means hit the number 3 to bring up L3. Let's just hit enter for the time being. So it brings L3 up on the main menu, and again, if we wanted to print it, we could hit enter, but it's empty, so we get this invalid dim error. Alright, so that's how you access the list variables, but what about actually filling them with data? Well, there's a few ways you can do it. The easiest way is probably through the stat menu. So if you hit stat, there's an edit submenu, and the first option is edit. So if we hit this time, let's say we hit number 1, so notice 1: means 1 corresponds to the option of edit. Alright, so it brings up this table, and notice the header is the lists again. So these are tables that allow us to enter numbers into the lists. So let's say I wanted to enter into L1. I would navigate over to L1 and then hit enter, and then notice my cursor is now blinking down below. This will allow me to enter data into it. So I can type whatever I want here, let's say 15 and then 16 and then whatever, 10, doesn't matter. Alright, so now I have some data in there. I can go back out and print it to screen by accessing L1 and then hitting enter, and now we have some data there. Yay. So that's one way of doing it, through the stat menu. We can do it directly through the main menu here. If you look at the parentheses buttons above the 8 and 9, above them is a blue bracket. That is our set notation for lists. So we can enter lists directly with these curly Q brackets, I call them. So let's go and pick one. Notice this symbol that just came up is the same symbol that got output when we printed L1 to screen. So let's put some data in manually this way. Let's say 13. Now to separate values when you're doing it this way, this is maybe a little tricky. When we printed L1, notice it prints with spaces. We don't want to use spaces, we want to use this comma here. So above 7 there's a comma. And then we'll say 12, comma, whatever, 9. And then we can close our set here. And then we could print it. We haven't stored it in a list though, we've just printed it to screen basically, doing nothing. What you want to do is, when you're finished entering it in, you want to store it in a list. So above the on, there's a store button. So when I hit that, here we go. Notice it gives me this arrow. So that arrow basically means put this data into whatever I'm about to type. So let's say we want to put this in L2. I'd hit the second button and then 2 and then enter. All right, now we got data in L2. So we could print that to screen just to verify. All right, so that is another way of entering data. The last way I'm going to show you is probably the most important way because it allows us to generate data without having to entering it in manually. You can imagine what I've shown you so far. If we had a data set with, say, 40 data points, it's going to get a little bit tedious entering them all in. So rather than doing that, the best way of generating large data sets is through list operations. And you can access the list operations through the list submenu. So hit second list, and then notice the second column there is ops. So number 5 there is sequence. It stands for generating a sequence. And if you hit enter, it'll bring up this submenu, and it'll ask you for a few bits of data here. So the first bit it wants is an expression that's going to use to generate data. So we have to create an algebraic expression that'll give us numbers as we input different values into it. So maybe if I type it out, it'll make it more sense. So let's say we entered x squared, and then for the variable we would put x. And let's say start at 0, end at 10, and step with a value of 1. So what does that mean? It means starting at 0, input that number into x squared. So we're going to put 0 into x squared and say 0 squared equals 0. Then we're going to put a 1 in there, get 1 squared equals 1. Put a 2 in there, get 2 squared equals 4, excuse me. Put 3 in there and get 3 squared equals 9, so forth and so on, all the way up to 10. So that's what this menu here does. It's a way of generating data quickly. And then we can paste it into the main menu here. And then just like when we entered the data manually, we have to store this in a list. So if we hit the store button here and then pick a list to store it in, let's pick L3 this time, and then enter. Notice we get some output here that tells us what the sequence looks like. So that's what I was saying. It's just squaring each number up through 10. If we go to the stat menu here and to the edit menu, we can see that all 3 of these lists now have data, and we can go through all of it. And that's it. That's how you enter data into your lists. I hope you learned a lot.